Good morning, English 11. Okay, we got to talk about something. First of all, you guys know that on YouTube there's analytics, right? Like I can see how many of you are actually watching my video, A, and B, watching my videos all the way through. And Miss Arkland can see the same. So I have a little bit of a challenge for you, okay? I want you to watch this entire video in its entirety, as in all of it, okay? And we'll see how much you can get through before you have to get up and go to the bathroom or go get another drink of water or whatever, go do something else. I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can, okay? But we can tell also just by the quality of your submissions. I know a lot of you think you can get this done by just kind of looking at the slides and kind of trying to figure out how to write it up yourself, but if you aren't watching the video, you really aren't learning exactly what our expectations are. So I recommend that you watch this entire video today so that you're well prepared for your test tomorrow. We're making this video today also because I want you to be well prepared for that test tomorrow. And I didn't want to just give you the test today because I feel like that would have been really unfair considering you just had 4 days off, 4 days of just kind of doing whatever you wanted to do. So we have to get back into the mode of school and get back into the studying mode and buckle down and really just kind of just refresh our memory on as to what we were even talking about, right? So basically, there's a couple things I want to communicate to you about the test right off the bat. First of all, it's going to be very familiar because you've basically already taken this test in some ways. The test format is going to be another Nick Adams story, okay? And you, in taking this test, you are going to just be looking for the traits of a Hemingway hero in the character Nick, right? And I say that in that particular way, in that particular order, because we're not looking for the Hemingway traits of some other character, okay? We are looking for the Hemingway hero traits of just Nick. And you've never read this story, unless you went out and read all of the Nick Adams stories, which I doubt you did. So you probably won't be familiar with this particular text, but you should be familiar with all the traits. And I want to just take a second to go over some of those traits, talk about some of the ways in which I think after grading your assignments from last week, ways that I think you got confused by this assignment, and ways where I kind of think that the Hemingway hero name is a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, the Hemingway hero, like we think of hero, we have a very sort of a set idea of what a hero is. And the Hemingway hero is almost the complete opposite of that. In many ways, the Hemingway hero is an anti-hero of sorts. And I want to highlight that today as I just go through these traits and just tell you a little bit more about Ernest Hemingway, because honestly, he was kind of a weird guy. So I've just sort of made this presentation for you, and I hope you like it, and I hope it's helpful. But in the very least, if you've watched this video, you'll have the traits in your head so that tomorrow when you go out and you take this test, you'll be a little bit more equipped to actually handle it. So let's talk about Ernest Hemingway for a second. First of all, Ernest Hemingway, we're talking about the characteristics of the Hemingway hero, right? That is the complete opposite of the normal kind of hero. And I say complete opposite, I guess that's not even quite it. It's not entirely the opposite. There are many correlations between maybe what we would think of as the traditional hero and the Hemingway hero. But there are some ways where Hemingway will look at someone who would not traditionally be considered a hero and still say, yep, that's a hero right there. So first of all, Hemingway is going to say someone who, especially a young man, because he was really, really masculine. He believed in masculinity almost to the point of chauvinism, to be honest. A hero is a young man who is physically or emotionally wounded, which sounds bizarre, right? Until you think of, like veterans today. If you've been in a war and you've been fighting on the behalf of America, you were injured, you sustained injuries over the course of that combat for whatever reason, America's going to look at you and go, you're a hero, right? But you also have to remember that sometimes, even though we give lip service to those heroes, we don't always necessarily give them the support that they need. I mean, how many times have you driven down the highway and seen a homeless veteran, right? Because they've sustained injuries that haven't allowed them to work, and society has fallen down on our job of just sort of recognizing that, but also offering the necessary support for that person after they've sustained those injuries. So you can already see how the Hemingway hero, what he's noticing about the world, is still somewhat true today, even though Hemingway was writing these stories 100 years ago, right? So that's trait number one. And remember, I'm just going to say this again, you're looking for these traits within Nick in the story that we're going to give you tomorrow during the test. Okay, so just Nick. We're looking at Nick. How is he emotionally or physically wounded? And if you can find a quote, support your explanation of that quote with some solid evidence, you're going to be set. It's easy. It's easy peasy. Okay, the next Hemingway trait that you should be aware of is that Hemingway kind of thought of heroes as he liked to romanticize heroes as somewhat alienated, somewhat like a loner, separated from society, not really fitting into a box. And that, again, in some ways fits with our traditional sort of idea of what a hero should be, but in some ways it doesn't. Usually when we think of a hero is someone who brings some sort of distinct value to society, and Hemingway wouldn't have necessarily gone that far. He was okay with the hero just being kind of different from everybody else. So if you can find ways where Nick in the story that we give you tomorrow is feeling like a loner, is feeling alienated from traditional values and sort of ways of thinking about the world and ways of existing within society, then you're onto it, right? The next trait that you should be aware of and remember so that you do well in this test tomorrow is that Hemingway believed that the world is filled with tragedy and irony. And you have to remember about Nick, the character Nick in these stories, is that Nick is pretty much an exact one-for-one replica of Hemingway himself, right? So Hemingway is almost writing about himself. Some of these stories have the power of memoir. They're really close anyway. And Hemingway is using his own personal experiences, his own memories to fuel his writing, his fiction on Nick, right? This character Nick, who's not real, but who is definitely influenced by a lot of Hemingway's experiences. And so Hemingway's view of the world is coming out in Nick's attitudes as you read these stories, and that's really important to recognize. So he believed that the world is filled with tragedy and irony, and he believed naturally that he was a hero, and so his heroes have that quality as well. They, when they look at the world, see tragedy and they see irony. Okay. The next trait that you should know about is that he believed that that he didn't want himself to see himself as a hero, but he also did. So here's where some contradictions start to again come into play. So Hemingway simultaneously wanted so badly to be a hero, but he also couldn't show that he wanted so badly to be a hero. It's sort of an ego thing for him. He's definitely self-centered. He definitely thinks highly of himself, but his characters try not to think highly of themselves, even though they're thrown into these situations that are almost like fantasies, right? Like as if Hemingway is having this fantasy where he'll just be thrown in the situation and then he's got to save the world. Maybe you've had daydreams like that as well. Hemingway certainly did, and he certainly used that to fuel his writing. So he's thinking of his heroes as people who are just kind of everyday people, but who somehow heroically have to come through for the other people in the story. The other thing you should realize about Hemingway heroes is that he always, just like he himself, wanted his heroes to be masters of sports. They were always great at fishing, hunting, bullfighting, you name the sport, he wanted to be great at it, and his heroes were often great at it as well. And Hemingway was a really talented guy in a lot of ways. He did a lot of really intense things. He was kind of a jerk about it. Here you can see him posing in this picture with a bunch of animals that he killed. But, he did it well. Like everything in his life, he just wanted to live it to the fullest and really live this life of luxury. He also wanted to just kind of sometimes lived this really ratchet existence too, and that was always a balancing out, kind of in his life. There were moments where he was really comfortable on the African plains, just shooting stuff, and then in the next moment he'd be in this lavish hotel drinking champagne or something harder, because honestly he was a total alcoholic. Okay, what else do we want to know about Ernest Hemingway? He was a soldier to some extent. Ernest Hemingway's actual track record when it comes to the military is kind of spotty, to be honest. He wasn't actually a great soldier. A lot of his heroes are great soldiers, but realistically, Hemingway kind of fought on the front lines, especially in the Spanish War, just after World War I, right in there. But he also didn't. He really was just writing and making little movies of other soldiers fighting, okay? So he actually preferred more the aesthetic of being embedded with like a little ragtag renegade group. He didn't really want to be a part of anyone's army. He just really liked being around soldiers, okay? The next characteristic of Hemingway, and I'm so sorry he's shirtless here, but I'm also if you don't see these images, you're not really going to understand who Ernest Hemingway is. Why is he shirtless here? Honestly, it's not necessary, but it was a trend at the time. A lot of men during this time wanted to be photographed in action poses shirtless. He also appears to be in a bathroom here. Again, I don't know why. But anyway, so he was really interested in being a man's man, interested in showing masculinity and just sort of oozing masculinity everywhere he went. It was just kind of flowing out of him. And here he is doing more of that with a double-barreled shotgun, shirtless in a bathroom, posing clearly for the camera, just looking really stoic. Like, what is that necessary? No, of course it's not. But it's Ernest Hemingway, so of course he did it. In his heroes, often, especially Nick, because Nick is Hemingway, remember that, often showed this trait as well. They were sort of traditionally masculine. He was also just kind of, just wanted to show grace under pressure. He always wanted to look really nonchalant, really relaxed, while doing impressive things. That's kind of something that his heroes show as well throughout all of his stories, but especially the Nick Adams stories. So hopefully that was a helpful refresher. Hopefully you got a little window into just how weird Ernest Hemingway was. And I just want to impress on you the importance of recognizing that the Hemingway hero archetype is not exactly the same as your traditional hero. And that's okay. That's not really what we're looking for. What we're looking for is your ability to find these traits that I've just outlined again for you, these exact traits in the Nick Adams story that you're going to read on the test tomorrow. So you're going to have that story, you're going to read through it, and you are going to identify one of these traits or a few of these traits, and you're going to find quotes, and you're going to explain how those quotes show that trait. And that's going to be it. So thanks for watching all the way through. I know this was kind of long, but this is all you have to do today, okay? Just take notes on these Hemingway hero traits, and I promise you, you will be prepared and ready for the test tomorrow.